We have made Florida the nation's most desired destination, and we have produced historic results. But now's not the time to rest on our laurels. We have the opportunity and indeed the responsibility to swing for the fences so that we can ensure Florida remains #1. Don't worry about the chattering class. Ignore all the background noise. Keep the compass set to true north. We will stand strong. We will hold the line. We won't back down. And I can promise you this, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis opened a new session of the Florida legislature today, vowing to continue to use his power for political retribution. Republicans have a supermajority in the state legislature and are set to pass a full slate of repressive laws on the governor's wish list. If you're a teacher, you can't talk about gender identity with students from the 3rd grade to the 8th grade. You are not allowed to use any pronoun except the one you were assigned at birth. Do you want to major or minor in gender studies in college? Well, not if Republicans get their way. They're considering legislation that would put a stop to that and any discussion of intersectionality at the college level, and that would end any diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I guess if it ain't white, it ain't right in DeSantis-stan. School board positions would go from nonpartisan to partisan, clearly to benefit Republicans. Then there's the legislation that goes directly after journalists. Anonymous sources would be deemed inherently fake. Unsurprisingly, the law would also make it easier to sue journalists if politicians don't like what they report. There's a separate bill that would force anyone who writes about public figures and gets paid for it to register with the government, basically forcing people to get government permission to form an opinion. On abortion, the Republican legislature doesn't think the 15-week ban goes far enough. They now want control of women's bodies at 6 weeks before most women even know they're pregnant. The state also wants to make it a felony for a parent to drive their undocumented child to school. You could be punished with up to 5 years in prison for doing so, or to so-called harbor an undocumented person, which, depending on how the law is interpreted, could literally just mean living with them. The legislature is eager to clear DeSantis' path to the presidential nomination by silencing any opposing views or risking any unhelpful stories about him or them. And they're also covering all the right-wing primary culture war bases by allowing people to carry guns in Florida permit-free, which should be great news for school shooters, while ignoring actual crises like the exploding crises of housing affordability and insurers leaving the state. Just in case you're wondering if this man actually cares about Florida at all. I mean, just look at his coming schedule. This week, DeSantis is taking his poorly reviewed book on tour to Alabama and Iowa. Joining me now is Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani. And thank you, Representative Eskamani, for being here. I can only imagine what it's like to be in the minority watching what Republicans are doing. But are they open about the fact that they're doing this in order to give DeSantis something to run for president on?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Joy. And we're watching, but we're also fighting back. As you know, in Florida, we might be the minority, but we leverage every opportunity we have to call out the far right and to paint how extreme these actions really are. I really think Republicans are just blinded by power here in Florida, and they're going too far. You know, just today they filed a 6-week ban on abortion, something that Governor DeSantis didn't mention in his speech because he's too scared to talk about abortion. So it's important for us to ensure that the American people understand that what is happening in Florida is not what you want to happen across the country if this man gets anywhere near the White House.
Well, I mean, the thing is, having a supermajority enables him to get his whole wish list through. And I'm just going to put up just just some of the bills. There's the Don't Say Gay expansion. There's the ban on diversity and equity programs at public universities, partisan elections, making bloggers register, the immigration bills. It's this blizzard of legislation. And he then can go out and say, hey, look, I can do this for the country. Fabiola Santiago, who writes for the Miami Herald, said that Republicans, want whatever every dictator has: total domination over what people think, whom they love, what they read, total political control over law and policy without organized opposition to offer an alternative. Floridians must wake up. But the reality is that wouldn't be the way it is in Washington, right? So he's sort of selling his base a false premise that he could do this in Washington. In Washington, you'd have the Senate and the House.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, he's trying to out-Trump Trump, right, in every way that he can. What does worry me, though, is just the consolidation of power that he has seen in Florida, where we don't have checks and balances anymore. The legislative branch has totally just been co-opted by the governor. Our judiciary, just like the federal Supreme Court, has now been co-opted by the right as well. And so I do worry that as we continue to move down this path, that the checks and balances just don't exist anymore, because Republicans, just like we've seen the Trump effect, they're too scared to challenge someone like Trump, because if they do, they will be primary. They'll be rejected. And we see that same type of mentality in Florida when it comes to DeSantis. And of course, going up against Trump in a primary, very questionable if DeSantis could even survive that. But at the same time, the fact that we are navigating these extreme policies in Florida, we're the canary in the coal mine for the American people, to give everyone a warning of what could happen if you don't stop DeSantis now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he'd be going up against somebody who doesn't have to have lifts in his shoes to appear taller than he is. I mean, look, the reality is that, let me ask you this, because there is obviously a Senate and a House in the state of Florida, but you all are in a super minority. Is there anything available to Democrats in order to make sure that the percentage of the population, the state isn't 100% Republican, that people who don't want this and who don't want bigotry baked into the government to defend them?
Yeah, such a great question, Joy. This has to be an inside-outside strategy. So we'll do what we can in the legislative chamber. I mean, I've spent hours today just working on amendments for different bad bills, trying to strategize with our colleagues, leveraging every rule we have to delay these bills, amend these bills, and hopefully destroy these bills. But we can't do it without the public. We can't do it without Floridians calling their lawmakers, coming to Tallahassee. I just hopped off a call for reproductive health that had more than 200 people attending. So the energy is there. We have to mobilize it in the direction to have an effect, which is why paying attention to state politics is so important. And we need every Floridian to wake up and realize what's at stake before we lose all of our collective freedoms and our rights.
Has anyone that didn't vote said to you, Representative Eskamani, I wish I had?
Yes, always, especially young people who did not realize there was a midterm or feel motivation to vote in the midterm. Elections have consequences, and we're finding power in that pain to help folks get energized today. And in fact, through my voter registration organization, we're hosting youth organizing boot camps to get more young people plugged in.
Yeah, and we lost your audio. I mean, this guy won because about 1.3 million people just stayed home. And this is what happens when you stay home. You get somebody like this who is clearly drunk with power and thinks he can get himself a federal upgrade. Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani, thank you so much.